Whether we are there or not, ITSP Magazine still gets the best stories. Plenty of conferences and events spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli go on location and sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity.
All right. Hello, everybody. Here we are again. I'm still in Florence. As you can tell, it's a morning sun. If you're watching, just hitting my face. I didn't need to. That's the beauty of what we do. I can be anywhere in the world and have a good time interviewing smart people and talk about conference, which it's even a little bit more far away than where I am right now. It's on the other side of the world, of course, depending where you are. And of course, we're talking about one of my favorite events, actually, which is the event in Melbourne that I was last year, the CyberCon, and is happening in a couple of days or less, depending on when you're going to hear this. But it doesn't matter. This is going to be fresh content. And I honestly think it's going to be a fascinating conversation, very much in line with the thing that I talked about on my podcast, Redefining Society and Technology, because technology touches everything we do. We don't even know about it. And so cybersecurity is attached to that, and it touches your food. It looks like it. And everything else that you go and shop at the grocery store and shop around. And I think we got a taste of that when something big happen in the world, like a pandemic or some really big breaches or wars or fears and so of that, and everything is connected. So this is about the coverage with Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli. Of course, Sean is not here because the time zone is not on his favor, and it works for me and for Amberley Brady, which is right here from all the way from Sydney, and she will be speaking in Melbourne during the event. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Marco. It's a pleasure to be on the show today.
Well, it is a pleasure. It would have been even more a pleasure being there for me, but it didn't happen. But again, technology is allowing us to be close, to meet new people like me and you, and to meet people that I actually met in person last year, like JJ. That was the first episode for this coverage. So let's introduce Amberley to myself and my audience. We spoke a little bit before. So who are you, what you do, and what do you talk about specifically at the event?
So I guess I've got a bit of a different pathway into the cyber world. I haven't necessarily started out in tech. So I studied law and I've worked in policy. But my main sort of passion has always been around food and supply of food to myself and other people, and for our farming community. I'm really passionate about that. So following on from 2019 and COVID, where we saw things running out on the shelf, I was actually quite worried that what would happen for the rest of our community if this kept happening. And I know a lot of people were worried about it, Marco. Like, I don't know what it was like in Italy per se, but it was pretty bad in Australia. We really did suffer. And I know that for me, it stayed in my mind, and it was always really heavy thinking what would happen if this happened again. So with that in mind, we would then see fluctuating pricing in our supermarket stores from week to week. And I couldn't understand. And I would see little notes down there saying, oh, there's a drought currently. Tomato prices are twice the price, 3 times the price, week on week. And I couldn't understand why it was changing so rapidly. And I wanted to see that we would look after that sort of sector better. And I also wondered why we didn't have a commodity sort of based approach to our food pricing. So why don't we have a system where we can see how much things cost? Why is it not live pricing? How much was my farmers being paid? And to see where my food was coming from, that was a real interesting journey that I was sort of committed to going on. And through some cybersecurity skills that I picked up and my genuine, inquisitive nature, I went out and I built Real Food Price, cyber.com.au, and I started tracking pricing. And I started tracking pricing because I really wanted to know the answer, Marco. That's really the response. No one else was doing it. And I thought, I'm going to build this system, see how I go, give it a crack, doing it on my own, and see what I get. So that's what I did.
I love it. It's what I call the hacker mentality. Now we're talking about cybersecurity. Hackers is like, hey, I got to figure it out. I got to make a better solution. I got to break things to make it better. In your case, you actually had to start from scratch something that wasn't there. At least I'm understanding in Australia, because you're focusing all your work, it's focusing actually for the infrastructure in Australia related to food. But before we start talking, and I was trying to understand your approach, you mentioned that, of course, we talk about a global economy. I think I was reading not too long ago that there's only few countries, maybe if even just one, that can produce the entire supply of food in the world that is necessary for their population. We go to the grocery store now, or we get, the season are not there anymore, pretty much. I mean, in Italy, maybe some people like to go cook with the season, and I think it's the most beautiful thing, but whatever you want is there. I mean, I'm in LA, I can get tomatoes and avocado at any time of the year. So that everything is connected. And when you realize this, tell me about the connection with the cybersecurity events. Because you mentioned pandemic wasn't necessarily a security issue, but I think everything unfolded, right?
Yeah.
When you start looking at that.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Marco, Australia does produce their own food and fiber. So we are not reliant on other countries, but that's not the same for a lot of other countries. And I lived in Norway, for example, and I would see that oranges came from Spain and different prices for different things being imported left, right, and center. And they were quite, it was quite interesting to see that and to be in different countries and see the prices of fruit and vegetables that were largely imported. But on the touch point of cybersecurity and why it's important is because there is a reliance on what we're actually exporting. So Australia we actually grow up to food for 70 million people. So this food has to move. This has to be exported. This has to be shipped across the different countries. And there's a lot of different systems that underpin this movement. So it's critical infrastructure that is underpinning the movement of these goods around. And there's vulnerabilities within those. And cybersecurity would be the industry are well and truly across all of those sort of critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. But for people within the agri-tech space, this isn't necessarily something that's in their DNA. And so there needs to be a bridge between the two spaces. And that was where I saw an opportunity for someone like me to come in to discuss this, because I have both the sort of skill sets with the look of the way that the world's heading in the geopolitical space. You can look at other countries, for example. The UK have put agri-tech as a new frontier that they're going to be focusing on and moving agriculture back into centre stage. And that focus on agri-tech and the way that it will unfold is there will be vulnerabilities in that technology that comes out. We're importing more agri-tech into our country. So the Hongju T70, that's the new autonomous vehicle, which will be, it's a tractor. But with that, where will the data be going for that? That's a question that we don't necessarily have the answers to. They will be looking at the soil conditions and providing sensory information being fed back through to a system that we may not have control over. So there's vulnerabilities in the cybersecurity of those assets that will be coming into Australia as well. So there's so many touch points for cybersecurity in the agri-tech field, and we really need to start looking at that closely, not just the other side of critical infrastructure, which could be the roads or the rail. It's really looking at how we can make sure that our supply chain and the food security within Australia is quite hardened. And for example, with the US, DARPA actually last month put out a call to different tech companies asking for them to provide their agri-tech solutions. So they've realized that agriculture is really, it is their bread basket, but it could also be their Achilles heel. because you could wipe out an agricultural, like a sector, and that could be more efficient than bombing a city, because you will have people suffering in extreme cases without food. So there's a lot of touch points in that sort of protection in the cyberspace that I think we really need to advocate for and be quite pushing for it to be more within the agro tech space.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned DARPA actually this year at RSA conference San Francisco, which we've been covering for 10 years. For the first time, DARPA, they had a walkthrough, like a virtual space where they were showing all the different infrastructure from hospitals to water supply to electricity and everything interconnected. And it was interesting to kind of wrap your head around this matrix that we live our life with and think about it, but then this happening. And when you think about agriculture, you think about something very traditional, especially maybe Italian, right? You go back to the way it was, and you can't really do that. I mean, you can create an organic product, traditional product, but once you put it on the market, even if you don't have the tractor that drive itself, the autonomous vehicles, which are there, the supply chain, it's humongous, and I think it's important for us to think about it. And my question, before we go more in the specific of your talk, because I want people to know about exactly what you're going to talk to all these cybersecurity brains there in Melbourne. How is what you're finding out, is it getting traction with the government? Is it getting traction with implementing, or are we still in the, hey, there is a problem, look here?
Yeah.
I mean, is it Australia doing something about it?
Yeah, so I've researched all the other sort of international models, for example, like with the digital food exchange in Italy. I've looked at the Hungarian model, which is what similarly my platform is based off. And within the first 3 months of the Hungarian model, it saved 50 million euro for the consumers. So that's
when you say
money.
save, can you tell me how?
So they looked at so with transparency, once you demonstrate transparency along the supply chain with the costs that are associated from the for example, with my platform, from the farmer to the wholesaler to the consumer. So the Hungarian model is based on showing the transparency, and it noted that there were price drops in the items that were listed on their platform. So, for example, milk dropped 12 points, which is huge. So there were a number of different items that, overnight almost, it magically, that sort of artificial inflation disappeared. So what you see then is the ability to calculate what the savings will be for a consumer. So looking at it from that point of view, if you say, okay, the start is the tomatoes are X, Y, Z. So I've been researching different commodities, so different vegetables. So with watermelon, for example, over the summer months, and I met with the CEO of Watermelons Australia, Jonathan Davey. So we looked at pricing over the summer months. The cost of production was between $1 to $1.40, $1.50 per kilo of watermelon. Plus they have to pay the transport costs. So that's on the farmer. But then it's being sold all year round for about $1.99 to $2.50, right? So there's $1 there. But what the farmers were being paid was sometimes 40 cents a kilo. So they're losing money on their production costs. But once you have those figures, and once you remove the murkiness and have that transparency in pricing, you see where the markup is. You can look at both ends and start asking the question. So my platform was about gathering the evidence and having those robust discussions, and it has been very well received. So sorry, Marco, I'm coming back to your question. I haven't forgotten.
It's my fault.
So I have been meeting with the different sectors and discussing it. And it's obviously from the grower and the consumer side, it's been very well received. In terms of implementing it into government, there's been a number of discussions that I've had in terms of creating, I've been writing a lot in relation to sort of supporting papers as to why this would be an appropriate way forward. It's a different model and a different way of thinking. And Australia is starting that journey in terms of they've had a call out for papers to have a look at what they're going to do in this space and have a digital strategy or a food security strategy, and to really look at how that could work and play out. So I've provided that input in terms of everyone else has been very, 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 very complimentary of the system because it has worked in Hungary. So there's that also backing up what I'm doing. It's not necessarily something that hasn't happened anywhere else. And there's opportunity there to save people real money and to really redivert our thinking into having the prices in the palm of our hand, because something like this platform could give you that information, sort of like a fuel app or something along those lines that we have in Australia. I'm not sure if you have the same thing, but it does go to what you say, Marco. The future of farming is that, and the sad reality is we will have to feed more people with less, because we are going to run out of arable land that we can farm. And a lot of countries have noticed that. They've said, okay, China, for example, has 20% of the population, but only 7% of arable land. And I realized this is the future. If we don't start securing our food systems, then what does this look like for us? We need to make sure that we have supply. We need to have control over the supply chain. We need to understand our vulnerabilities. And so with recent issues in Japan with the reservoir rice crisis, you saw the same issues that came up in 2019 with COVID, where the shelves were not stocked and panic set in because people don't necessarily trust social media. They're not trusting the information that's coming out. And there's panic that was widespread. People running in to buy the rice, freaking out that they were not going to have those opportunities to purchase the rice, despite government coming out saying there's no crisis. They saw the empty shelves and they were triggered. And I think I'd be triggered too, because we've lived through COVID. So moving forward, if we see an image of an empty shelf, we will run to the store. And I think that's kind of going to be human behavior, because we've lived through that interesting time that we will panic. And we don't need to if we get this right and we start investing money into programs and systems that will look at our food security and really harden those up and have a path forward.
And I feel like the transparency, I mean, I can open an entire can here that I'm not going because we don't have an hour, but maybe I want you back on my show. We can talk about that. Creating panic, a lot of, it is from the fake news, the fake video, to the AI generated images. I mean, picture, pretty easy to do a picture of an empty shelf and have people freaking out. And that's still cybersecurity. It's still something that happened because we're not controlling. Well, it's media and information security as well. But I mean, it's a bigger sociological picture. But when you actually, and again, I would love for you to come back and kind of like talk about this, that maybe when you do have a transparency, like a box made of glass, if something does happen, maybe there is a better way to go and pinpoint, like, wait a minute, this is not true, because I can see the whole picture. I'm just assuming that could be that. But when to go back into what you're presenting there, you're going to be presenting to mostly IT professional that, I know those guys and girls. The tech is going to resolve everything. That's how we've been talking for the longest time. And then slowly in the past few years, the human element came back, and the social engineering, and now the AI and the ethics and all of that. So what are you going to tell to this crowd that you going to have in Melbourne? Where are you going to focus? And what do you think that particular crowd is going to get from, or what do you expect them to get from your presentation, from your talk?
So I think there's a couple of interesting points that I like to really drum into people when they come and hear me speak. One, in relation to the first discussion and session that I'm running in relation to don't outsource your thinking. That is to ensure that people aren't becoming complacent with AI. We're going to start trusting it. We're going to not hear bells and whistles going off and warning us. And my concern is that we're not going to notice when things are going wrong, because we will be complacent and also trusting the AI. So I am going to be discussing the complacency creep, like I call it. So it's creeping in and you're sort of like, oh, it's fine. And then automatically you don't necessarily have those technical skills to be able to pull yourself out of the box that you're falling into. And then it's sort of like, okay, we need to be really analytical here. And if we haven't been thinking outside the box, or is there something in my gut telling me that this doesn't feel right? If we're not trusting our gut and trusting our thinking, this is where we need to sort of really bring that back, creating the human firewall. So we've got the essential 8, and I feel like we should have the essential 9 in Australia, because the 9th one really is about our people and creating that human firewall. And it's not necessarily in everyone's DNA, cyber, but it should be, because at the end of the day, everything and as we move forward into the future, there will be cyber elements to everything that we do. And just because it's not in front of you and you're not seeing it, doesn't mean it's not underpinned by it. So you can see hospitals that would have had a cyber attack, but there's been, and I will discuss this in one of my talks, there was an amazing CISO in Australia that realized, okay, there is still a need for paper-based client referrals and client management, because hospitals are going to be a target. So there needs to be that intuition and that, does this feel right? Are we going to create complacency without trust in AI? So I will be discussing that and giving examples of how people picked up different transactions. So Michael Rodriguez from CBA, he picked up and realized that there were transactions that weren't necessarily unusual, but they felt weird. And so he acted on that. That is the untouchable human element that AI will never be able to replace, because you can't train it to think intuitively like a human and analyze in that respect unless it has been told to do so. So I do discuss that. And then also on top of it, as we've already touched on, I will be discussing food security and how the different sort of models of different countries and success stories, and the reason that we really need to take this the front and center of cyber. And I realize that this is a new area, and I'm conscious that this is going to bring up lots of questions, and I hope that it does, because for me it's imperative. Everyone has to eat. It's vital. So we need to have these discussions about how we can ensure that our future generations can afford food and live in a sustainable future. There's just so many facets that cybersecurity is going to start to come in, and cybersecurity will be in every sort of pocket of the tech that agri-tech will have in the future. So I'm starting the conversation, Michael, and I realize I am sort of probably one of the early disruptors in this space, but we've got to, as you said, hack it, pull it apart, put it back together, make it look and feel right. And then we can have those discussions and really push for some answers that haven't necessarily been given in the past. And the rest of the world's on this trajectory. So geopolitically, you can have a look across the board. Everyone's doing something in this space. And it's really about connecting those relationships and understanding our supply chains and the vulnerabilities, the cyber vulnerabilities in those.
Yeah. And another thing that you mentioned, I think I'll use that for my wrap, is the fact that you actually looked to other system and other solution that are already implemented. You took it, the Hungarian one, and you kind of like apply it to another. My point is, collaborating at the global level, it means that you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yeah.
It's sharing knowledge, and that's a big point of conversation in cybersecurity, sharing information, sharing intelligence, but also sharing solution, what worked for someone and how we can actually take what worked for me and what worked for you. And last year I talked to the ambassador for cybersecurity there in Melbourne, and that was about that. I'm like, dude, what does an ambassador does for cybersecurity? Well, talk to other people from other country all over the world, and together maybe we can help each other. So I think starting the conversation, it's very important. I think the crowd will be very, very receptive to that. It's the cybersecurity community. It's a very curious community, and I think overall they do want to help and they want to get involved, and that's definitely something important. So last minute for people that are going to listen to this and say, oh, I am going to the conference, I'm going to go listen to Amberley. And for others, that maybe they can catch your conversation later on or connect with you on LinkedIn or whatever. So your call to action, and you can close for me if you want.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll have to take your advice, Marco, and come to Italy because they've got the digital food exchange, which looks like it's a pretty interesting concept. And that's based on like cooperation and sort of sharing. So in that spirit, I'm really thankful for the opportunity, and I'd love to connect further with other people in this space, anyone else in food security or anyone else in cyber that thinks that they'd love to connect with me. Please do reach out on LinkedIn. Say hello to me at CyberCon. I'll be there. And awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. And when is your talk?
Great. So I'm on Wednesday, and that will be the one that's on there. I'll just read it out. Sorry, because I keep forgetting the times. So don't outsource your thinking. That's Wednesday at 3:30. And everyone is protecting my password, but no one's protecting my toilet paper. Back on that COVID-19 thing. That would be on the Thursday at 10:20 to 10:40. So.
And I think everybody wants to know what's going on with toilet paper. Course, and food.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially.
Yeah, and food. Yeah. So that was a play on the toilet paper thing from COVID. But yeah.
All right. So the last thing, this is a coverage for Transform to Evolve, which is kind of like the theme, CyberCon Melbourne, Australian Cyber Conference. And that is happening right now, 15th, 17th of October at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Center, which is awesome. I really enjoyed it, my stay in there. For everybody listening, stay tuned. We'll have more conversation, actually, even with the organizer, probably post-event to see how things went and look back and look for maybe next year what the plan is. So stay tuned with On Location with Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli. And Amberley, thank you so much. I really enjoyed these conversations. Good, stay in touch. And if you wish, come back on my other show. We can talk for a lot longer. So...
I'd love to. Thanks, Marco. See you later. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Sean and Marco's On Location event coverage conversations. Please take a moment to give the show a good rating and leave a comment. Remember to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Come back for more conversations and follow Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli as they continue their journey toward redefining cybersecurity and society.